Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she collected the spent brass casings scattered across the concrete floor. The indoor shooting range at Phoenix Arms Training Center hummed with its usual afternoon rhythm. The sharp crack of pistol fire, the mechanical whir of target carriers, and the constant chatter of weekend warriors discussing their groupings. For 3 years, she had worked behind the counter, renting guns to customers, selling ammunition, and cleaning up after everyone else's target practice. At 24, Sarah had never fired a gun in her life. Growing up in a household where her mother feared firearms and her father worked double shifts at the auto plant, guns were never part of the conversation. When she took the job at the range, it was purely out of necessity. The pay was decent, the hours worked with her community college schedule, and the owner, Jim Hendricks, was patient with her complete lack of firearms knowledge. The regulars had become familiar faces over the years. There was Betty, the 70-year-old retired nurse who came in every Tuesday with her pink-gripped revolver. Frank, the ex-police officer who still carried himself like he was wearing a badge, spent most Saturday mornings working on his draw speed. The college kids would show up in groups, usually making too much noise and treating the guns like toys, until Jim or Sarah reminded them about safety protocols. But Marcus Rivera was different from the usual crowd. He had started coming in about 6 months ago, always alone, always focused. Sarah noticed how other customers seemed to give him space, not out of fear, but out of respect. There was something about the way he carried himself, shoulders back, eyes alert, moving with a precise economy of motion that suggested military training. Marcus never said much beyond ordering his lane time and ammunition. He would nod politely to Sarah when he paid, always leaving exact change and a small tip. She had watched him through the reinforced glass that separated the retail area from the shooting lanes. While other customers would empty magazines as fast as they could pull the trigger, Marcus took his time. Each shot was deliberate, measured, followed by a pause as he studied his target through a small scope. One busy Saturday afternoon, Sarah was restocking ammunition when she overheard Frank talking to another regular about Marcus. The conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed Sarah listening, but she caught enough to understand that Marcus was former military. Specifically, a Navy SEAL who had recently returned from deployment overseas. The knowledge made Sarah observe Marcus differently during his next visit. She noticed the small scars on his hands, the way he unconsciously scanned the room when he entered, and how he always chose the lane furthest from the entrance. When he spoke to ask about different types of ammunition, his voice was quiet but carried an authority that made people listen. Sarah found herself curious about his story, but the professional boundary between range employee and customer kept her from asking personal questions. That boundary began to blur on a particularly slow Wednesday evening, when a group of college students came in drunk and belligerent. Jim was at home with the flu, leaving Sarah to manage the range alone. The 4 young men had been drinking at a nearby bar and decided that shooting guns would be the perfect way to continue their celebration. Sarah refused to rent them firearms, citing the range's strict policy against serving intoxicated customers. The group became increasingly aggressive, with one of them leaning across the counter and demanding service. Marcus had been in lane 12, working through his usual routine of precision shooting. The commotion at the front desk was impossible to ignore. Sarah watched through the glass as he calmly removed his ear protection, set down his pistol, and walked toward the retail area. His presence immediately changed the dynamic in the room. Without raising his voice or making threats, Marcus simply positioned himself between Sarah and the drunk college students. When the most aggressive of the group started to protest, Marcus spoke in the same quiet voice Sarah had heard him use when ordering ammunition. He explained calmly that the young man had 2 choices: leave immediately and voluntarily, or wait for the police to arrive and leave in handcuffs. The certainty in his voice, combined with his obvious physical capability, convinced the group to stumble back out into the parking lot without further incident. After they left, Sarah realized her hands were shaking. The confrontation had escalated faster than she expected, and she felt unprepared for how aggressive the customers had become. Marcus noticed her distress and offered to stay until closing time, just in case the group decided to return. During the quiet hour that followed, Sarah and Marcus talked more than they ever had. She learned that he had completed 4 deployments in the Middle East before leaving the military 6 months earlier. The transition to civilian life was proving more difficult than expected, and the shooting range had become a place where he could find some measure of peace and routine. Sarah shared her own story, working to pay for college while living with her sick grandmother, dreams of becoming a teacher, and her complete inexperience with firearms despite working at the range. Marcus listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions about her studies and her goals. As closing time approached, Marcus helped Sarah with the routine of securing the range and cleaning up. While they worked, he mentioned that everyone should know basic firearm safety, regardless of their personal feelings about guns. In a world where firearms existed, understanding how they worked and how to handle them safely was simply practical knowledge. Sarah found herself agreeing, though she admitted her nervousness about actually firing a gun. The noise, the recoil, the potential for something to go wrong, all of it seemed overwhelming to someone with no experience. Marcus suggested that if she was interested in learning, he would be willing to teach her the basics, not because he thought she needed to become a gun enthusiast, but because working around firearms every day, without understanding them, was like working in a chemistry lab without knowing which substances were dangerous. His offer was made, without pressure or expectation. If she wanted to learn, he would help. If not, he understood completely. Sarah thanked him for the offer and promised to think about it. That night, driving home through the dark Phoenix streets, Sarah replayed the evening's events. The drunk customers had been more threatening than she initially realized, and Marcus's intervention had likely prevented a much worse situation. His calm competence in handling the confrontation made her think about her own lack of preparedness for such situations. Working at the shooting range had always felt safe because of the controlled environment and security measures, but tonight had shown her how quickly things could change, and how helpless she had felt when faced with aggressive customers. Maybe learning basic firearms handling wouldn't be about becoming someone different. Maybe it would be about becoming more capable of handling whatever situations life might present. Sarah arrived at work the following Thursday with a decision made. She had spent the previous night researching basic firearms safety online, reading articles about gun handling, and watching instructional videos. The more she learned, the more she realized how much she didn't know about the tools she worked around every day. When Marcus came in for his usual evening session, Sarah approached him during a quiet moment. She accepted his offer to teach her basic firearms handling, but with specific conditions. She wanted to learn about safety, proper handling techniques, and basic marksmanship, not because she planned to become a gun owner, but because she felt it was irresponsible to work in this environment without understanding the fundamentals. Marcus nodded approvingly at her reasoning. They arranged to meet the following Sunday morning before the range opened to the public. Jim had given Sarah permission to use the facility for training, recognizing that having a more knowledgeable employee would benefit everyone. Sunday morning arrived with Sarah feeling nervous but determined. Marcus had arrived early and set up lane 4 with targets at close range. He had brought his own pistol, a simple, reliable 9mm that he explained was ideal for learning basic principles. The first lesson wasn't about shooting at all. Marcus spent an hour teaching Sarah the fundamental rules of gun safety. Every gun is always loaded until proven otherwise. Never point a gun at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until ready to shoot. Know what's beyond your target. He demonstrated proper grip, stance, and sight alignment using an unloaded pistol. Sarah practiced these movements repeatedly until they began to feel natural. Marcus was patient but thorough, correcting small mistakes and explaining the reasoning behind each technique. When they finally loaded the pistol with a single round, Sarah's heart was racing. The weight of the gun felt different with ammunition in it, more serious, more consequential. Marcus stood beside her, talking her through each step as she aligned the sights on the target just 7 yards away. The first shot was louder than she expected, even with ear protection. The recoil surprised her, though it was less violent than she had imagined. The bullet struck the target several inches to the left of center, but Marcus seemed pleased with the result. Over the next hour, Sarah fired 20 rounds, with Marcus providing gentle correction and encouragement. By the end of the session, she was consistently hitting the center of the target. More importantly, she had developed an appreciation for the precision and concentration required for accurate shooting. Marcus explained that marksmanship was as much mental as physical. managing breathing, controlling emotions, maintaining focus despite distractions. These were skills that extended beyond firearms into other areas of life. Sarah found the comparison interesting, recognizing similarities to the concentration required for her college mathematics courses. As they cleaned the pistol together, Marcus shared more of his military experience. He had served as a designated marksman in his SEAL team, responsible for precision shooting during operations. The skills he was teaching Sarah were the same fundamentals he had learned during his initial training, practiced throughout his career, and now used to maintain his abilities in civilian life. Sarah asked about his transition from military to civilian life. Marcus was honest about the challenges. After years of having a clear mission and brotherhood with his team members, civilian life felt unstructured and isolated. The shooting range provided routine and reminded him of the precision and discipline that had defined his military service. He had been considering different career options since leaving the Navy. Private security work was an obvious choice given his background, but he was also exploring opportunities in law enforcement or training. The idea of teaching others appealed to him, particularly helping people develop confidence and competence in areas where they felt vulnerable. Sarah shared her own aspirations to become a teacher, specifically hoping to work with elementary school children. They discussed the similarities between teaching academics and teaching practical skills like firearms handling. Both required patience, the ability to break complex concepts into manageable steps, and the skill to adapt instruction to different learning styles. Their conversation was interrupted by Jim arriving to prepare for the range's opening. He was pleased to see Sarah taking initiative to learn about firearms and complimented Marcus on his teaching approach. Jim suggested that if Sarah was interested in continuing her education, she might consider pursuing instructor certification eventually. The idea hadn't occurred to Sarah before, but as she thought about it throughout the following week, it made sense. If she was going to work at the range through college, becoming a certified instructor would make her more valuable as an employee and provide additional income through private lessons. Marcus continued coming to the range regularly, and their Sunday morning training sessions became a routine. Sarah's shooting skills improved steadily, but more importantly, she developed genuine confidence in handling firearms safely. The nervous energy she had always felt around guns was replaced by respectful competence. By the third week of training, Sarah was shooting at 15-yard targets and consistently hitting the center ring. Marcus introduced her to different types of firearms, revolvers, rifles, and shotguns, explaining the unique characteristics and applications of each. Sarah found she had a natural aptitude for precision shooting, particularly with rifles at longer distances. During one training session, Marcus brought up the possibility of Sarah participating in local shooting competitions. He explained that competitive shooting was an excellent way to test and improve skills while meeting other enthusiasts who shared a commitment to excellence and safety. Sarah was initially hesitant. The idea of competing in something she had just learned seemed premature, but Marcus pointed out that many competitions had beginner divisions, and the experience would accelerate her learning while building confidence. He offered to accompany her to a local match as an observer first, so she could see what competitive shooting involved without the pressure of participating. Sarah agreed, curious about this aspect of shooting sports she had never considered. The following Saturday, they attended a local pistol match hosted by the Phoenix Precision Shooters Club. Sarah was surprised by the diversity of participants, men and women of all ages, from teenagers to retirees, representing various professions and backgrounds. The atmosphere was friendly and supportive, with experienced competitors offering advice to newcomers. Sarah watched Marcus compete in the expert division, observing how the skills he had taught her applied under time pressure and competitive stress. His performance was impressive, smooth, fast, and accurate. Other competitors approached him afterward, clearly recognizing his expertise and seeking advice on their own shooting. Several people introduced themselves to Sarah when they learned she was learning to shoot. She was invited to try the next beginner match, with offers of equipment loans and additional coaching. The welcoming attitude of the competitive shooting community surprised her, contrasting sharply with stereotypes she had held about gun enthusiasts. Driving home from the match, Sarah realized that her initial goal of simply learning basic gun safety had evolved into something much more significant. She was discovering a new community, developing a challenging skill, and gaining confidence that extended beyond firearms into other areas of her life. Marcus noticed her thoughtful mood and asked about her impressions of the competition. Sarah admitted that she was interested in trying a match, but worried about embarrassing herself or not being ready for the challenge. Marcus reminded her that everyone at the match had been a beginner once, and that the shooting community generally celebrated improvement and effort as much as winning. If she decided to compete, he would help her prepare and provide coaching during the match. His confidence in her abilities was reassuring, but Sarah knew the decision had to be her own. She was no longer the same person who had been afraid to touch an unloaded gun just a month earlier, but competitive shooting represented another significant step forward in her development. Sarah made the decision to enter her first competition on a Tuesday morning, while studying for her education psychology exam. She had been reading about confidence building in children when she realized she was avoiding the shooting match for the same reasons many of her future students might avoid challenging academic tasks, fear of failure, and embarrassment. If she planned to encourage children to take intellectual risks and embrace challenges, she needed to model that behavior herself. That afternoon, she told Marcus she wanted to register for the upcoming monthly pistol match. Marcus was pleased but not surprised by her decision. Over the past month, he had watched her transform from someone who flinched at the sound of gunfire to a shooter who could consistently hit targets at 25 yards. Her natural attention to detail and methodical approach to learning had served her well in mastering fundamental techniques. They spent the following 2 weeks preparing for the competition. Marcus introduced Sarah to the specific skills required for practical pistol matches: shooting from different positions, reloading quickly under time pressure, and maintaining accuracy while moving between shooting positions. The training was more physically demanding than Sarah had expected. Competitive shooting required not just marksmanship, but also cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, and coordination. She found herself exercising more regularly to build the stamina needed for matches that might last several hours. Marcus also taught her about equipment selection and maintenance. While she would be borrowing his gear for her first match, he explained how different pistols, holsters, and accessories could affect performance. Sarah was surprised to learn about the technical aspects of competitive shooting: the precise measurements of ammunition loads, the importance of consistent trigger pull weights, and the role of mental preparation. The mental game proved to be the most challenging aspect for Sarah. During practice sessions, she could shoot excellent groups when relaxed and focused, but when Marcus introduced time pressure or artificial stressors, her performance became inconsistent. Learning to maintain concentration while managing competitive anxiety became as important as developing physical shooting skills. Marcus shared techniques he had used during military operations to control stress and maintain performance under pressure. Breathing exercises, visualization, and positive self-talk were tools that applied both to combat situations and competitive shooting. Sarah found these mental strategies helpful not only for shooting, but also for managing test anxiety in her college courses. As the match date approached, Sarah began questioning her decision to compete. During one particularly frustrating practice session where she kept missing shots she normally made easily, she expressed doubt about being ready for competition. Marcus reminded her that the goal wasn't to win her first match, but to learn from the experience and establish a baseline for future improvement. Every competitor had struggled through their first match, and the shooting community understood and respected the courage required to try something new and challenging. He shared stories from his early military training, describing how even elite special forces operators had to overcome fear and self-doubt when learning new skills. The difference between successful and unsuccessful students wasn't natural talent, but willingness to persist through initial failures and learn from mistakes. Sarah's confidence was also boosted by her growing friendship with other range regulars. Betty, the elderly nurse, had started offering encouragement and sharing stories from her own competitive shooting experiences decades earlier. Frank, the ex-police officer, provided practical advice about match preparation and equipment management. Even Jim, the range owner, had begun investing in Sarah's development. He suggested that if her interest in competitive shooting continued, she might consider working toward instructor certification and eventually helping with the range's training programs. The possibility of combining her education background with firearms instruction appealed to Sarah. The night before the match, Sarah experienced familiar pre-performance anxiety, similar to what she felt before important exams. Marcus had warned her to expect nervousness and provided strategies for managing it: early sleep, proper nutrition, and mental rehearsal of the match procedures would help her perform closer to her practice capabilities. Sarah arrived at the match venue, a different range across Phoenix, feeling nervous but prepared. The facility was larger than the range where she worked, with multiple bays designed specifically for competitive shooting. She watched experienced competitors setting up their equipment with practiced efficiency, checking and rechecking their gear. Marcus introduced her to several other competitors, including Janet, a middle-aged accountant who had started shooting competitively just 2 years earlier. Janet offered practical advice about match day routine and reminded Sarah that everyone wanted her to succeed and have a positive experience. The safety briefing covered rules specific to competitive shooting that differed from normal range procedures. Sarah paid careful attention, knowing that safety violations could result in immediate disqualification. The emphasis on muzzle control and trigger finger discipline was even stricter than what she had learned during basic training. When her squad was called to the first stage, Sarah's heart rate increased noticeably. The stage required shooting at targets from 3 different positions while navigating around barriers. It was more complex than anything she had practiced, combining movement, position changes, and accurate shooting under time pressure. Marcus served as her coach for the stage, providing encouragement and reminders about technique. As Sarah approached the starting position, she focused on the breathing exercises he had taught her and tried to visualize successful completion of the course of fire. The start signal seemed louder than expected, but Sarah began moving through the stage with deliberate focus. Her first few shots felt awkward, but as she settled into the rhythm of the course, her practice took over. By the 3rd shooting position, she was moving with more confidence and shooting with better accuracy. When the stop signal sounded, Sarah realized she had successfully completed her first competitive stage. Her time was slow compared to experienced competitors, but she had hit all the required targets and made no major errors. More importantly, she had overcome her initial nervousness and performed reasonably well under pressure. Marcus was clearly proud of her performance, pointing out that she had shot better than many people did in their first competition. The other competitors in her squad offered congratulations and encouragement, creating a supportive atmosphere that reduced Sarah's anxiety for the remaining stages. As the day progressed, Sarah's confidence grew with each stage. Her shooting improved as she became more comfortable with the match format and procedures. She began to understand why Marcus had encouraged her to compete. The combination of physical skill, mental focus, and competitive pressure created a unique challenge that was both demanding and rewarding. During the lunch break, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that first shooting lesson with Marcus. She had discovered abilities she didn't know she possessed and gained confidence that extended beyond firearms into her academic work and personal relationships. The afternoon stages presented different challenges: longer shots, more complex movement, and time pressure that tested both speed and accuracy. Sarah's performance remained consistent, indicating that her training had prepared her well for the demands of competition. By the end of the match, Sarah had completed all stages without major errors and finished in the middle of the women's division. Her scores were respectable for a first-time competitor, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could handle the pressure and complexity of competitive shooting. During the awards ceremony, Sarah was recognized as a new competitor and welcomed to the sport by the match director. Several experienced shooters approached her with offers of additional training and invitations to future matches. The sense of community and mutual support surprised her, contrasting with the isolated, intimidating environment she had expected. Driving home with Marcus, Sarah felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had set a challenging goal, prepared systematically, and achieved success despite her initial fears. The experience had taught her as much about herself as about competitive shooting. Marcus asked about her impressions of the day and whether she planned to continue competing. Sarah's answer surprised even herself. She was already looking forward to the next match and thinking about areas where she could improve her performance. Sarah's success at her first competition created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the shooting range. Her newfound confidence translated into better performance in her college courses, improved interactions with difficult customers at work, and a more assertive approach to personal relationships. Within 2 weeks of the match, she had registered for 3 more competitions and begun a serious training program with Marcus. They met twice weekly for structured practice sessions that focused on specific skills: draw speed, reload techniques, shooting while moving, and accuracy under time pressure. Marcus approached Sarah's training with the same systematic methodology he had used in military instruction. Each session had specific objectives, measurable goals, and detailed analysis of performance. Sarah kept a training journal documenting her scores, identifying areas for improvement, and tracking progress over time. The physical demands of competitive shooting required Sarah to modify her lifestyle significantly. She began a fitness routine that included cardiovascular exercise, strength training, and flexibility work. The sport demanded more athleticism. Then she had realized matches could last 6 hours and require hundreds of rounds fired while moving between shooting positions. Sarah's improved physical condition had unexpected benefits beyond shooting performance. She felt more energetic during long work shifts and study sessions, slept better, and experienced less stress during exam periods. Her grandmother noticed the positive changes and encouraged Sarah to maintain her new interests and activities. At the range, Sarah's role began evolving beyond basic customer service. Jim recognized her growing expertise and started having her assist with new shooter orientations and basic safety classes. Her education background made her effective at explaining complex concepts in understandable terms, and her recent experience as a beginner helped her relate to students' concerns and difficulties. Marcus suggested that Sarah consider pursuing official instructor certification through the National Rifle Association. The credential would allow her to teach classes independently and provide additional income while she completed her education degree. More importantly, it would formalize her role as someone who could help other women overcome their initial reluctance about firearms. Sarah discovered that many women visited the range with boyfriends or husbands who had good intentions but lacked teaching skills. These men often inadvertently intimidated female beginners with advanced techniques, loud firearms, or impatient instruction. Sarah's gentle approach and recent experience overcoming similar fears made her particularly effective with nervous new shooters. Her second competition went significantly better than the first. Sarah's scores improved in every stage, and she finished in the upper third of the women's division. More importantly, she felt comfortable with match procedures and began enjoying the competitive aspect rather than simply trying to survive the experience. Marcus was clearly proud of her rapid improvement, but he also began challenging her with more difficult training scenarios. He introduced shooting in low light conditions, engaging multiple targets with specific time requirements, and complex courses of fire that tested decision-making skills as much as marksmanship ability. The most significant challenge came when Marcus suggested that Sarah try precision rifle competition in addition to practical pistol matches. Long-range shooting required different skills: reading wind conditions, understanding ballistics, and maintaining concentration for extended periods while making extremely precise shots. Sarah was initially hesitant about rifle shooting. The firearms were more expensive, the equipment more complex, and the learning curve steeper than pistol competition. But Marcus argued that her natural attention to detail and methodical approach to problem-solving would translate well to precision rifle disciplines. Their first rifle training session took place at an outdoor range 30 miles outside Phoenix. The targets were placed at distances from 100 to 600 yards, far beyond anything Sarah had attempted with pistols. The rifle Marcus brought was a precision bolt-action firearm with a high-power scope that made distant targets appear much closer. Learning to shoot accurately at long range required Sarah to understand weather conditions, calculate bullet trajectory, and make precise adjustments to her scope settings. The mental challenges were as demanding as the physical requirements, requiring careful analysis of each shot and systematic adjustment of technique. Sarah discovered that rifle shooting demanded a different type of concentration than pistol competition. Instead of the dynamic, fast-paced movement of practical pistol matches, precision rifle required patient, methodical execution of each shot. The slower pace suited her analytical personality and allowed her to apply problem-solving skills in a new context. After several weeks of rifle training, Sarah entered her first precision rifle competition. The format was completely different from pistol matches. Competitors had extended time periods to engage targets at known distances, with scoring based on accuracy rather than speed. Sarah's first rifle match was held at a range in the desert outside Tucson, requiring a 2-hour drive to reach the facility. The competition lasted an entire day, with stages at distances ranging from 200 to 800 yards. The targets were smaller than those used in pistol competitions, requiring extreme precision to achieve high scores. Marcus served as her spotter for the match, using binoculars to observe bullet impacts and help Sarah adjust her aim between shots. The partnership required close communication and trust, similar to the relationship between military snipers and their spotters during combat operations. Sarah's performance in her first rifle match exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Her methodical approach and attention to detail translated well to long-range shooting. She finished in the top half of the women's division and earned praise from experienced competitors for her consistent performance throughout the day. The rifle competition introduced Sarah to a different segment of the shooting community. These competitors tended to be older, more technically oriented, and focused on precision rather than speed. Many were engineers, mechanics, or others whose professional backgrounds involved detailed analysis and problem-solving. Sarah found the rifle community particularly welcoming to women and new shooters. Several experienced competitors offered equipment loans, training advice, and invitations to informal practice sessions. The collaborative atmosphere contrasted with the more individualistic nature of some other sports Sarah had observed. Balancing pistol and rifle competition created scheduling challenges for Sarah. Matches often occurred on weekends, conflicting with her work schedule and study time. She negotiated with Jim to adjust her work hours, trading some weekday shifts for weekend time off to attend competitions. Her academic performance remained strong, despite the additional time commitment. If anything, the mental discipline required for competitive shooting improved her focus during study sessions and test-taking. The confidence gained through shooting sports carried over into classroom discussions and presentations. Sarah's relationship with Marcus had evolved from student-instructor to training partners and close friends. They spent hours analyzing match videos, discussing techniques, and planning training strategies. Their shared commitment to improvement and mutual respect for each other's abilities created a strong partnership. Marcus revealed that Sarah's rapid improvement and teaching aptitude had inspired him to consider establishing a training school for competitive shooters. His military experience provided expertise in instruction and program development, while Sarah's education background and communication skills would appeal to civilian students. The idea of combining their complementary abilities into a business venture excited Sarah. She began researching the requirements for establishing a firearms training facility, investigating potential locations, and developing curriculum ideas for different types of students. Sarah's transformation from nervous range employee to confident competitor and potential instructor had taken less than 6 months. The journey had required dedication, consistent practice, and willingness to embrace challenges that initially seemed beyond her capabilities. As she prepared for her next competition, a challenging match that would test both pistol and rifle skills, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that first shooting lesson with Marcus. She had discovered abilities she never knew she possessed, developed confidence that extended into every aspect of her life, and found a community of people who shared her commitment to excellence and continuous improvement. The shy college student who had once been afraid to handle an unloaded gun was now teaching others, competing successfully, and planning a career that combined her passion for education with her newfound expertise in competitive shooting. Sarah's life took an unexpected turn when she received a phone call from Detective Maria Santos of the Phoenix Police Department on a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the range. The detective explained that Sarah's name had come up in connection with a series of armed robberies targeting small businesses in the area, specifically gun stores and shooting ranges. The caller wasn't suggesting Sarah was involved in criminal activity. Instead, Detective Santos explained that the robbery crew had been conducting surveillance of local ranges, studying employee schedules and security procedures. Sarah's name appeared in surveillance reports as someone who worked alone during certain shifts, potentially making her location a target. Detective Santos requested a meeting to discuss security measures and gather information about any suspicious customers Sarah might have noticed. The detective also mentioned that the robbery crew was believed to be targeting facilities where they could steal firearms, and several range employees across the state had been injured during recent incidents. Sarah felt a chill as she considered how vulnerable she was during evening shifts when she worked alone. The range's security system included cameras and alarms, but response time for police in their industrial area averaged 8 to 10 minutes. A lot could happen in that time frame if criminals were determined and well prepared. When Marcus came in for his usual training session that evening, Sarah shared the detective's warning. His expression grew serious as he listened to the details of the recent robberies. His military training had included security assessment, and he immediately began evaluating the range's vulnerabilities with a professional eye. Marcus pointed out several security weaknesses that Sarah had never considered. The front entrance was visible from the parking lot, making it easy for criminals to observe when employees were alone. The gun storage area was accessible from the customer area, and the cash register location provided no cover if someone entered with violent intentions. He suggested immediate changes to improve Sarah's safety during solo shifts. These included keeping the front door locked between customers, installing additional lighting in the parking lot, and developing an emergency plan for different threat scenarios. Marcus also recommended that Sarah consider carrying a personal firearm for protection, given her training and the increased risk. Sarah had never considered carrying a gun outside the controlled environment of shooting ranges and competitions. The idea of being armed during daily activities felt like a significant step that would change how she moved through the world. But the detective's warning made clear that the choice might be between being prepared for danger or being helpless when it arrived. Marcus offered to help Sarah obtain her concealed carry permit and select appropriate equipment for personal protection. He emphasized that carrying a firearm was a serious responsibility that required additional training beyond what she had learned for competition. The techniques and mindset needed for personal defense differed significantly from target shooting skills. Over the following week, Sarah researched the legal requirements and practical considerations of carrying a concealed firearm. Arizona's laws were relatively permissive for law-abiding citizens, but the responsibility of being armed in public carried moral and legal implications that required careful consideration. She enrolled in a concealed carry class that covered legal issues, tactical considerations, and the psychological aspects of armed self-defense. The instructor emphasized that carrying a gun meant being prepared to make life-and-death decisions under extreme stress, potentially changing multiple lives in a matter of seconds. The class included scenarios that forced students to think through complex situations where the decision to use or not use a firearm could have tragic consequences. Sarah found these exercises more mentally challenging than any competition she had entered, requiring her to consider moral and legal factors while under simulated stress. Marcus supplemented the formal class with private training focused on defensive shooting techniques. These differed substantially from competitive shooting, emphasizing quick, accurate shots at close range while moving to cover, shooting from awkward positions, and engaging threats while protecting innocent bystanders. The defensive training was physically and emotionally demanding. Marcus created realistic scenarios based on actual criminal encounters, forcing Sarah to make rapid decisions while managing the stress of simulated danger. The exercises revealed gaps in her abilities and highlighted skills that required additional development. Sarah's first experience carrying a concealed firearm felt strange and uncomfortable. The weight of the gun, even a compact model chosen specifically for concealment, seemed obvious to her despite being invisible to others. She was hyper-aware of the weapon throughout the day, constantly checking to ensure it remained concealed and accessible. Marcus had warned her that the psychological adjustment to carrying a firearm could take weeks or months. The knowledge that she was armed changed how she perceived potential threats and her response to conflict situations. Interactions that might have seemed routine previously now required assessment of whether they could escalate to violence. 2 weeks after Sarah obtained her concealed carry permit, the warning from Detective Santos proved prophetic. She was working an evening shift alone when 3 men entered the range just before closing time. Their behavior immediately seemed wrong. They showed no interest in firearms or accessories, instead focusing on the layout of the facility and the location of security cameras. When Sarah asked how she could help them, the men claimed to be interested in renting lane time for target practice, but their questions focused on employee schedules, closing procedures, and the location of the gun storage area rather than rates or range rules. One man positioned himself near the entrance while the others moved to flank the counter where Sarah stood. Sarah's competitive shooting, training, and defensive practice with Marcus had developed her situational awareness significantly. She recognized the men's positioning as a classic robbery setup and realized that her situation was becoming dangerous rapidly. The men had not yet made overt threats, but their behavior indicated hostile intent. Following the emergency procedures Marcus had taught her, Sarah calmly activated the silent alarm system while continuing to engage the men in conversation. She moved behind the counter to a position that provided better cover and access to both her concealed firearm and the range's defensive measures when the apparent leader of the group began demanding access to the gun storage area. Sarah knew the situation had moved beyond suspicious behavior to active criminality. 6 months after the robbery attempt, Sarah stood at the podium of the Arizona State Competitive Shooting Championship, having just been announced as the winner of the Women's Precision Rifle Division. The trophy in her hands represented more than athletic achievement. It symbolized a complete transformation of her identity and capabilities. The path to this moment had been marked by consistent improvement and expanding opportunities. Sarah's reputation as both a skilled competitor and effective instructor had grown throughout the shooting community. Her story of progression from nervous beginner to championship-level shooter inspired other women to overcome their initial reluctance about firearms. Marcus stood in the audience, clearly proud of Sarah's achievement. Their training partnership had evolved into a successful business venture. Rivera Martinez Tactical Training had opened 3 months earlier in a purpose-built facility that combined competitive shooting instruction with practical self-defense training. The business had succeeded beyond their initial projections. Sarah's teaching background and gentle approach attracted students who might have been intimidated by traditional firearms instruction, while Marcus's military expertise provided credibility with law enforcement and security professionals seeking advanced training. Their client base ranged from complete beginners like Sarah had once been to experienced shooters looking to improve competitive performance. The facility offered classes in basic gun safety, concealed carry preparation, competitive shooting sports, and advanced tactical applications. Sarah had completed her instructor certifications in multiple disciplines, becoming one of the youngest certified trainers in Arizona. Her combination of recent competitive success and proven teaching ability made her particularly effective with students who shared her analytical approach to skill development. The business had also attracted attention from law enforcement agencies seeking qualified instructors for officer training. Several police departments had contracted with Rivera Martinez Tactical Training for marksmanship improvement programs, recognizing that Sarah's systematic approach to skill development produced measurable results. Sarah's academic pursuits had continued alongside her shooting sports involvement. She was completing her final semester of college and had been accepted into a graduate program in educational psychology. Her research interests focused on confidence building and skill acquisition, areas where her shooting sports experience provided unique insights. Her thesis project examined the psychological benefits of competitive shooting for women, documenting how participation in the sport affected self-confidence, stress management, and willingness to take on new challenges. The research had attracted attention from sports psychologists and women's advocacy organizations interested in promoting female participation in traditionally male-dominated activities. The data from Sarah's research confirmed what she had experienced personally. Competitive shooting provided benefits that extended far beyond marksmanship skills. Participants reported improved confidence in professional settings, better stress management during exams and presentations, and increased willingness to attempt challenging new activities. Sarah's story had been featured in several shooting sports magazines and women's publications as an example of how proper instruction could help newcomers succeed in competitive shooting. Her articles emphasized the importance of finding qualified instruction, setting realistic goals, and focusing on personal improvement rather than comparison with others. The media attention had led to speaking opportunities at shooting sports events and women's conferences. Sarah's presentations focused on overcoming fear and self-doubt, using her journey from nervous beginner to national-level competitor as a framework for discussing personal development and confidence. Building her relationship with Marcus had remained professional and mutually supportive throughout their business development. They had complementary skills and shared commitment to helping others develop confidence and competence with firearms. Their partnership demonstrated how military experience and civilian education could combine effectively. The training facility had become a hub for the local competitive shooting community. Regular matches and practice sessions brought together shooters of all skill levels, creating an environment where experienced competitors mentored newcomers and everyone focused on continuous improvement. Sarah's influence on the local shooting community extended beyond her business role. She had organized women's shooting groups, youth programs, and charity events that used competitive shooting to raise funds for local causes. Her leadership helped expand participation in the sport and improve its public image. The robbery incident that had tested her defensive skills remained a defining experience in Sarah's development. She continued to carry a concealed firearm and maintained her defensive shooting skills through regular practice. The knowledge that she could protect herself and others provided a foundation of confidence that influenced every aspect of her life. Sarah's success had also created opportunities to give back to others facing similar challenges. She volunteered with organizations that helped women escape domestic violence, teaching basic self-defense and firearms safety to those who needed protection from dangerous situations. Her gentle approach and personal story made her particularly effective with trauma survivors. The competitive shooting community had embraced Sarah as one of their own, recognizing her dedication to the sport and commitment to bringing new participants into competitive disciplines. Her rapid progression from beginner to champion demonstrated what was possible with proper instruction, consistent practice, and mental dedication. As Sarah looked out at the crowd celebrating her championship victory, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The shy, nervous young woman who had been afraid to touch an unloaded gun seemed like a different person entirely. Yet the transformation hadn't required changing her fundamental personality. Instead, it had revealed capabilities that had always existed, but needed development and confidence to emerge. Marcus approached the podium to congratulate Sarah on her victory. Their conversation turned to future goals and opportunities. Sarah's success had attracted attention from national-level sponsors and training organizations interested in her teaching methods and competitive achievements. The possibilities seemed endless. Sarah could continue competing at higher levels, expand the training business, pursue advanced degrees in educational psychology, or combine all these interests into a career focused on helping others overcome limitations and develop confidence. What mattered most to Sarah was that she now approached challenges with confidence rather than fear. The young woman who had once needed encouragement, just to handle an unloaded pistol, now had the skills and mindset to tackle any obstacle life might present. Her story demonstrated that transformation was possible for anyone willing to step outside their comfort zone, seek quality instruction, and persist through initial difficulties. The range employee who had started with simple curiosity about the tools she worked around had become a champion, business owner, and inspiration to others facing their own challenges. As Sarah held her championship trophy and prepared for the next phase of her journey, she carried with her the most important lesson from her transformation. Confidence and competence could be developed by anyone willing to embrace the process of learning, practice, and gradual improvement. The gun Marcus had handed her that first day had been just a tool. The real weapon had been the confidence and capability she had developed within herself.